on, everybody? Welcome to the East Coast Red and Gold podcast. I'm Niners Jess, Ty Austin, and your girl Bex are inactive tonight. We got Maddie B. What's going on, Maddie?
What's going on? I was unaware that I was going to be taking so many snaps tonight. I'm not going to do an Anthony Richardson and just tap my helmet at any point. I'm going to do the best I can. So this is
All
crazy.
right.
This is like Jordan Mason showing up for the season. Like, oh wow, I'm RB1 now. Cool. So that's what it feels like. So we'll
All
get
right.
going on this.
Awesome.
What a night.
All right. Well, before we get to our special guest, we're brought to you by Faithful Gear. Go to faithfulgear209.com and get your Niners gear made for the faithful by the faithful. So without further ado, let's bring on our special guest. We got Cam Inman from Bay Area News Group. Cam, what's going on?
I feel I've been elevated from the practice squad. It's a
You
normal
were like
elevation, no signing.
You were like Dalvin Cook the other night. Like, bam, here you are.
No,
Congratulations.
I could do more than 2 yards per carry. I think I could do more than that.
I hope so. That's we're counting on you here, so it's good. It's good news.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being
Yeah,
on.
thanks
Man.
for coming on. I'm glad we finally got to connect.
Yeah.
All
Only
right,
took a bye
so-
week. We only get one bye week a year, so we got to make the most of it.
That's true. Very true.
For now.
All right.
Next year, 2 bye
now.
weeks.
Yeah.
Give it some time.
All right. So before we get to some 49ers talk, I always like to start off about, just your career and your favorite memory, since covering the team, because I know you've been covering the team for a long time. So what's your favorite 49ers memory?
It hasn't been lately. This year is something else. It could happen in a few months because, boy, they've taken a lot of other paths to try to get to the Super Bowl. This is a very unique one. My favorite
Say that
memory.
again.
I mean, to me, it's whenever people ask me that, it's more about the people that you come across and meet, and obviously that includes a lot of players, the coaches. We're meeting more and more fans now thanks to this kind of interaction with social media and podcasts, and a lot of fans traveling on the road. I would say my favorite games that I've covered were the wins over New Orleans in 2019 in the regular season in the Superdome, and then the 2011 season in the playoffs, the back and forth battle. Those were awesome, just shootouts. I really enjoy going to every road stadium except maybe Washington. it's a dog. And then my favorite people have come across, like, you know what? I didn't cover Steve Young when he played, but I've gotten to know Steve Young pretty well over the last 25 years. He might be my favorite 49er I've ever dealt with, guy that was in the 49ers, but there's a lot of good people that have gone through it. And right now they have a pretty good nucleus. And I like the hierarchy a lot. I like that locker room. Yesterday and Monday were pretty hard days to get through because of the news with Charvarius Ward's daughter. Because I feel like I've gotten to know Mooney Ward pretty good the last 2.5 years, and we've had a lot of discussions about being a dad and family life. And that's the kind of stuff that you really get being on, like, covering the team. You get to know these people, and it's not always like interactions at press conferences or over Zooms or whatever, but just casual conversations at the locker. And actually, he was one that brought this up last time we talked last week, because he was asking me how old I was, and he goes, "Oh, you look really good for your age," which then you can figure out how old I am. And he's like, "How long have you been doing this?" I go, "Well, I turned pro at 16 when I started getting paid for it." And he's like, "Well, so you must really like it." And I go, "What I really like is just enjoying meeting a lot of people and talking to people. And in football, there's an incredible amount of turnover year after year. There's always stories, right? That's why it's like you never run out of new stories to tell. And it's hard to get so attached to one player. So, like, when people are buying like jerseys like you got behind you, you hope that there's staying power in those, right? And my son actually my son's 16. He just turned 17 last week. Anyhow, he came to his first 49er game last week, and he and my wife, they snuck into the team store and he bought a George Kittle jersey. So I'm like, okay, I approve of that. But I mean, a lot of times you don't know really the name of the who is your hero kind of thing. But I go, Kittle's a good guy, so I approve of that message.
Yes, he is a very good guy. All right. So you wrote a book.
George Kittle did a forward for that book. Speaking of a good guy.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
George
he
How do you,
did.
Kittle.
how,
George
how do you
Kittle and
go
Frank.
about asking him to do that, by the way? How does that go? Like, hey, George, writing a book. You want to rip out a foreword for that? Like, was he your first
Well,
choice? How did that go?
not only George, but Frank Gore. And it's like, well, and like I just told you, like Steve Young probably would have done it had I begged him. But I'm like, Steve's done a lot of forwards because he's such a nice guy. And I said, let me get some guys in the modern era Niners that have actually covered, right? And Frank and I worked throughout the year of trying to get together. Like we'd see each other all the time. Then finally, like pinned him down. We knocked it out. And so I asked George, because George knew I was writing the book during the season last year, because I'd asked him a couple of questions one-on-one, so there'd be exclusive stuff in the book, reason to buy it. And, I have, of all the times when I actually asked him if he would do a forward for me, was on locker cleanout day after the Super Bowl, 2 days after the Super Bowl. And I just kind of, I told him, I go, look, I go, the 49ers mean a lot to you and you mean a lot to the 49er fans. And I think that's kind of what I'm looking for in the book is somebody who appreciates the franchise, because the name of the book is The Franchise. And so that's he said he would be honored. And I said, great. And he said, give me a month to get over this Super Bowl and then we'll hash it out. And so we did. And he took like another month or so to fine tune it and really poured more heartfelt words into it. And so, I mean, the book alone, just reading what Frank and George had to say about the Niners, I think really hits home with a lot of 49er fans. And then on top of that, you get about 49 other chapters of what the 49ers have meant through my eyes and what I think people need to know about the team. And most, it covers most of the franchise, but I'm not going to tell you about the guys in the 1950s and 60s in depth. I'm telling you more about from the dynasty on, because those are my era and my teams. But we cover the quarterbacks, the coaches, the legends, the draft picks, the trades, the free agents, the stadiums, and the Super Bowls, which I am 0 for 3 now as a reporter covering.
You talk about your era, your teams. What was your favorite team to cover?
Hmm. Let me start off by saying the first year I got on was 2000, and Steve Mariucci was the coach. They were transitioning to Jeff Garcia. Terrell Owens was on the team. It was a combustible kind of transition from the ownership. And the best part about that team was Steve Mariucci allowed us to cover as much as we wanted at practice. We could stay on the practice field for 2 hours, talk to assistant coaches, players. There was much more looser. It was great for a new reporter learning about the NFL. And his staff was awesome. You had Greg Knapp, Jim Mora, Bruce DeHaven was around. Gosh, there's so many guys on it. Even Dan Quinn got his start on that staff, or Mooch's early staff. So kind of learning the NFL through them was a huge help for my career. My favorite teams that I've covered, the 2011 team, 2011 and 12 when Harbaugh took over was just a wild ride. And you never knew what you were going to get out of Jim Harbaugh at a press conference. 1 out of 3 days would be gold. Like when you're covering Terrell Owens, he didn't have to say anything. He was the easiest guy to ever write about, because he's either like magnificent performance on the field or very blow up and something crazy would happen. But and I'd say of like the Shanahan era teams, which one did I enjoy covering the most? The 2019 team was pretty darn special. I really enjoyed that because there was a lot of road trips involved in that one, including that, they lost in Baltimore, went down to Florida, went to New Orleans, won, and kind of rallied it up. And they gritted their way to that Super Bowl. A 2012 team, them making it to the Super Bowl with Kaepernick and Gore and Justin Smith and all that was a fun team too. And last year's team, I thought was from day one was going to go on and win the Super Bowl. I'm like every week I'm like, they're going to win. This team, 30 for Purdy. They just had all the stars and everything falling into place. And then that Super Bowl was never in their control. There were so many issues that went wrong in that Super Bowl. So that was not that. I didn't enjoy covering that team as much as I thought I would, looking back on it, because there was all this star power, and there'd be like, that's just the way it ended. It just all imploded. And In 2019, they had that Super Bowl under control, and it wasn't like 10 mistakes. It was one really good quarterback, and one or two things went wrong or didn't get called or whatever. And then this last year's Super Bowl, there was just so many mistakes, and that's carried over into this season where those 4 defeats, they were full of mistakes. It wasn't just necessarily one guy, and it's just like they got to tighten it up. They have all these stars, and so when everybody says, the 49ers this year, it's not their year, I go, hold on a second. NFC West is wide open. You got a healthy quarterback. You got Trent Williams. You got Nick Bosa. You got Fred Warner. You got George Kittle, Debo. There's a ton of star power still on this team. The NFC is open. The Detroit Lions look spectacular, but they've lost Aiden Hutchinson. I don't think they're going to be scoring 40 points a game the rest of the way. So that'll catch up to them. And obviously the Niners beat them last year in the NFC Championship game. But if that's the only thing in their way, there's a lot in their way. I just – it's far too early to give up on them. They're 4-4 at the midway mark, and a long way to go still.
Yes.
That season finale
long
against
way to go.
Arizona, that season finale against Arizona looks like it's going to be not a mop-up game like it has been in years past. Like
Yeah,
it's going
but
to
just
be like a
remember,
thing.
the Arizona gets off to hot starts, right? And then they fade.
It's true.
I think this coaching staff is pretty good. There was a player in the Niners locker room before the year started who asked my opinion on who the worst team in the NFL is. And Carolina and New England, where I think jumped out of my mouth. And I said, there's one in your division too. And he says, no, I think Arizona has a lot of talent. And I said, that could be the case, but I just think there's systemic problems with that franchise's history that catches up to them, that they can't get out of their own way. And I love their public relations director and a couple of coaches I know really well there. And Kyler's a wild card. But the NFL, it's a long season. So it's like, it could be great. Like, I think you're right, man. I think that really could be their biggest rival in the NFC West this year. Because Seattle kind of started out too hot and then they crashed back to earth. And, the Rams have Stafford in a decent running game, but I don't know what else they have. So.
I like that one. New Call of Duty just came out. Kyler's done. I mean, I could see that too. I felt like that late season purge or the fade was more of a Kingsbury thing, more so than an Arizona thing. So I actually thought last year, like, even in that late in the season game, like, Jess was there, I was there, and, you were there too.
Yeah.
They didn't have anything to play for, and they really weren't that good, but they definitely did not give up in that game. And they could have just said, beat it, thanks for playing. So that kind of showed me one of those deals where it's like, hey, they might be able to carry this over a little bit into next year. And like that win they had the other day against Miami is just that's one of those games where like,
they've won back-to-back games, I think, on walk-off field goals. They beat the Niners with a field goal with a minute and a half left. So that's that charmed special kind of season stuff that goes on your radar.
Yeah.
I mean, because remember, like one of those Harbaugh years, there were so many games that came down to the very end, and they're just like these white knuckle games. Whereas last year's team, that wasn't the case. As a reporter, when you're writing a story, you want this game over by halftime, and we're impartial. You guys can cheer for the Niners. We cheer for the early game over, so we know what way we can write the story. And when when that fourth quarter lead evaporates, you don't want to be around that press box because it's just like, oh, now I got to write 3 stories: 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 tie. I learned about the tie when Alex Smith got hurt and Kaepernick came in against the Rams in 2012. I'm like, wait, there's a tie? No. So.
Right.
You and Donovan McNabb learned that day. Like that was, yeah. I remember Donovan McNabb learned about the tie too.
What do you got, Jess? What are you going to say?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the injuries.
Okay.
Kyle Shanahan, he said Greenlaw, it will be week to week after the bye.
Yeah.
JP Mason re-aggravated his shoulder. He'll be reevaluated after the bye. Deebo Samuel, rib oblique, reevaluated after the bye. Renardo Green, ankle. Juwan Jennings, expected back after the bye. CMC, no setbacks right now. Should be practicing on Monday. Chris Conley, hamstring week to week. D Winters, concussion. And Gross Matos and Feliciano should be back soon.
So to translate, Week to week means they're not playing this week, probably. That it could be a longer term issue. Day to day means there's a good chance that they're okay, ready to go. All those injuries are normal. Everybody's just looking at Christian McCaffrey. This whole season is about the absence of Christian McCaffrey and how they're scrambling to try to stay afloat and hope they get him back. Now, if he comes back and becomes like full health McCaffrey in a month, that's a tremendous weapon to have for the stretch run. That's like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, you saved your closer for the end of the season to close it out. Very smart, wonderful, great, way to go. But it's such a serious issue, health issue for a guy that really takes hard care of his body, that he knows not to put it in jeopardy. And I think that's why it was really smart that they shut him down for the past month and a half. And, you know, we didn't really see much of him for the last month. We saw him last week in the locker room. Looked like he was growing his hair out a little bit. Didn't see that in his tinfoil costume last night. I know you all saw. But he's still Christian, looks very intent on being an elite running back. So when we would see him in pregame warmups and he'd have his sweats on, boy, he looks so frustrated, like he wants to be out there, which is great to see. You don't want a guy just kind of slapping hands going, yeah, I'll get back to something. Like, no, he is intent and wants to join this team, which is good to still see. That means there's still a good chance that he comes out and plays. So a lot is going to happen behind the scenes this week, and probably already has, of him working out on his own and ramping up. And come Monday, you would assume he's going to be part of the practice, because they usually have this bonus practice, but it's not. That's more of an hour kind of jog around session, which would be a nice way to reintroduce him to the action. But I could also see maybe they just let him warm up on the side and then bring it back officially, open the window Wednesday or something. So it's a 3-week window that they can gauge when he comes back. So then you go, okay, well, what is the importance of this game? You're going to Tampa Bay. It's an NFC game. Be nice to have him back, but he hasn't practiced in over a month and a half, almost 2 months. So is he all of a sudden going to be ready in 2-3 practices to play a lot of football on Sunday? I mean, he may be cleared and may see some action, but they cannot give him a full workload on Sunday in Tampa Bay. It's asking too much for a guy who's been out so long. The following game is Seattle, correct? And that's your division game. That's your bigger game. Division games. They got to win that division game. They got to win the division. And then from there on, you're on to Green Bay, and then you're on to Buffalo. And that's such a brutal, hard swing. And you're going to want a stud running back in possible inclement weather where your quarterback doesn't have to worry about slippery hands. I want to make sure McCaffrey's ready to go in those games too. Does that answer your injury questions?
Yes, but
it's all about McCaffrey.
Yeah. I don't understand why it's so hard for this team to perform without him when 31 other teams don't have Christian McCaffrey.
Right. I think because in the last year and a half, their offense became so predicated to revolving around him. And yes, they have great dynamic weapons all around them, but defenses can play them differently, and defenses have jammed the wide receivers at the line a little differently. What I've seen the last couple of games is when the Niners are I don't want to say they're having trouble getting off the line of scrimmage, because I'm not a wide receiver coach. I don't understand it. I'm not going to critique it. But what I can tell you is when I see these guys, all of a sudden they're running full steam into cornerbacks and going, I can't move. You're drawing a PI on them, right? Or illegal contact, which is great. That's what they should be doing. Use that to your advantage. And so they have to adapt, right? Because the defense has adapted without McCaffrey. So Mason's run the ball really, really well. And then Garendo gets in there and runs he has a few carries, and everybody goes, oh, this guy's better. Well, gosh, every year, right? Go back, Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., Breida. This system can make a running back a superstar, but McCaffrey is such a dual threat option. He is unlike the others. And, he really could be like an all-pro slot receiver if he wanted to be, along with an all-pro running back, kind of like the Justin Smith all-pro tackle and all-pro defensive end. That's kind of how I envision McCaffrey. So I really hope it, because I just enjoy watching good football when he's on the field. There's some great football, and especially inside the 10, he just has the nose for the goal line that this team lacks, and just finds a way to get through across that goal line that nobody else. That I did the stats today. It was something like he scored, I want to say like 39 touchdowns and 32 starts, including a touchdown in every single playoff game he's played with the Niners. And there's only been 5 of his 32 starts where he has not scored a touchdown. It's an incredible amount of production.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, talking about the win against the Cowboys, was it a perfect win? No, but it was a good, necessary win. Um, Talk a little bit about the rookies: Renardo Green, Malik Mustafa, Dominic Pooney, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, really stepping up.
They have. They're getting a lot of praise the last couple of weeks, which I'm just kind of like listening to reporters ask these questions, like fellow reporters ask these questions, giving flowers to the rookies for stepping up. And at the same time, you can't overlook like what George Kittle did in that game. You can't overlook what Purdy did. So, and everybody's just like, well, we talked about them. We don't need to talk about it. Let's talk about the rookies. Well, the rookies weren't supposed to be doing this because they were supposed to be the backups. They were supposed to be, I mean, this was a championship roster. We don't need the rookies, right? And then guys got hurt, and it's like, okay, now here's your depth. That's what that draft was all about, was adding to your depth. And this season, they needed to tap into that depth earlier than expected. And that started in training camp with Pooney taking over at right guard on day 3. And that guy's played really, really well. I mean, I will tell you, he's one of the best engaging communicators in the locker room without like kind of an agenda or message. He just kind of, it's very, I don't want to say innocent, but like you're getting pure quotes out of him like you would a high school athlete, just telling you exactly what they see without, and it's wonderful. And Pearsall, I mean, what a miraculous story he's playing. And then his burst on that 39-yard run, I don't think I'd seen him run that fast. And I said, wow, okay, they got something here. If you were going to tell me there was a rookie wide receiver running 39 yards on an end around, I'm like, well, it's Jacob Cowing. No, it was Ricky Pearsall. Garendo looks like it's taken him a while. Remember, you'd have those games where you get one carry for no yards. And you'd be like, well, what's going on here? But the more, I mean, he got his most touches. I think he had 15 touches against the Cowboys, and just said that really, the more reps you get, it's better. He obviously missed a block that could have been detrimental to the whole 49ers season on a blitz where Purdy got hit. But those are the growing pains you get by playing rookies. Renardo Green's interception in Seattle is probably the most overlooked play of the first half of the season, because that really bailed them out when they were on their heels, when the Seahawks were rallying, and he steps in front and cuts his pass off to DK Metcalf. You have a rookie going against this huge, big-bodied wide receiver, and picks it off and tries to take it to the house. That was a huge play. He's just not a guy that gets a lot of pub yet. So I don't want to diminish what the rookies have done, but at the same time, remember the start of the season, Fred Warner was NFL Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Bosa every game is there. He doesn't get the TJ Watt multi-sack, strip sack games. Everybody wants that, but he's consistently on the edge doing what he needs to do. And the Niners are consistently looking for help to the right or to the left of him. And that's why I say going to the trade deadline, they need some help. They did not bring in a rookie. I talk about the rookie class all you want. There's no rookie defensive lineman that stepped up. Sam O's done okay, but he's not a draft pick of theirs. They didn't draft one, and they ignored it, and they're going to pay the price if Bosa or Floyd go down.
Can you just tell me what the hell's going on with the special teams? Can we just what is the problem?
What are you talking about?
I feel like ever since the game against Green Bay, the playoff game against Green Bay,
did they not do well against the Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't. I was really surprised because I figured I was convinced Turpin would bring one back because Turpin's just dangerous as a whole, right?
He had a little glimpse of one.
Yeah. It just seems like they're always one millisecond away from like that dude going down. And I'll tell you right now, we are 2 weeks away from Seattle, and you know they're already cooking up some special teams BS.
Well, that's what the Cowboys figured to do with Fossils. But Bones knows how to do that too. The fact that they stopped that fake punt 2 games earlier, I'm like, oh, okay, they were on the ball, but then it all fell apart again. A lot of times when special teams go bad, the built-in excuse for NFL teams is, well, there's injuries and that puts new guys on special teams, and that cannot be the excuse for the start of the season, because there were so many mistakes made by guys that have played special teams before that you can't use that as a mistake. There were a lot of issues in almost every facet of special teams. The fact that your coverage units allowed your 2 kickers back to back to get hurt trying to make a tackle, it's unforgivable. Like, how in the world are you coaching these guys to cover? And I can understand if 1 or 2 guys gets trapped here or there 1 or 2 games, but you can't have that over and over. And I think that message got through last week, and they looked very good on special teams. What drives Niner fans crazy is there is no presence of a return element. There is no punt return spark. There's only close your eyes and hope to God the guy catches it and doesn't bobble the ball. And Cowan has not lost a fumble. He muffed one, I think, in Minnesota. But I honestly, going into this year, I thought Trent Taylor would make the team. I thought Trent Taylor was going to be a good return guy because that's his specialty. And he's also can play the slot. He knows this offense. The problem is you draft a guy that's really quick and you want to give him a shot. And it's no knock on Cowan because they rarely play him at all. Like, he's just started to play a little bit on offense. They haven't given him the ball yet on an end around or anything. But so you still have Trent Taylor in your back pocket that you can call up for 2 more elevations before you can add him to the regular season roster. Maybe you do that towards the end of the season. But it just drives me crazy, like, just kind of going, can you break a return at some point? Like, help the offense out here, man, because right now you're not getting anything out of that ever.
Thank you. That's all I need. I needed that validation from someone who covers the team.
Dude, like last week at this time, I went back and looked at every single game and wrote down all the special teams mistakes for a story I did on special teams that ran. I think it ran on Wednesday or Thursday in the Mercury News, and it was long. There was like every game had, like, I had major mistake, and then there was like a couple other mistakes I put in that graph, and it's just like an arrest log. It's like, oh my God.
So Brock Purdy did not have a good game against Kansas City. First half of the Cowboys game was a little rough. What have you seen from Brock Purdy this season so far?
I see a guy that is, well, at the end of last Super Bowl, he said he was going to work on his mobility this offseason. And he's obviously done that. He ran for as many yards as the whole Dallas Cowboys did. They each ran for 56 yards, which I thought was a cool stat Sunday. And he also did not have a turnover throwing the ball. He looks like he's really taking it upon himself to help cover for McCaffrey. And hold on, I got a spam call that I'm going to hang up on real quick. Anyhow, sorry. At the line of scrimmage, he's diagnosing things. I don't want to say he's overthinking it, because I think the defenses are throwing so much new stuff at him. Brock's a fabulous student of the game. He has been ever since he got in the NFL. I love seeing guys, when they first come into the league, sit at their locker and study the script, or study like their iPads. Fred Warner was one of those guys his first 2 years in the league. Brock was one of those guys, and they don't do it to show like they're studying. It's like they want to use every ounce of time they have to do that. So Brock, I think just watching that, he's like seeing how, like, it's like there's no ghost that he's like worried about, but he's escaping the pocket really well. And I think it's just kind of adapting. Obviously, not having Brandon Ayuk all training camp did not help matters, and now he's not going to have Ayuk at all going forward. But that's football, and it's all about adapting to the personnel around you. I just think Brock's a tremendous quarterback, where I don't have fears that he's not the guy. He is the guy, and the money is not on his mind. That to me is not an issue. Like, he knows he's going to get paid. He's not playing for the Bengals where they're going to try to cheat him out of money. It's a matter of working in what's kind of a different offense. It's there, people talk about there's less play action nowadays. There's different, the defenses are fooling them a little bit more. Well, that's stuff that the coaches need to figure out more than Brock does. And I just think he has a wonderful temperament. He doesn't have bad back-to-back games. He stunk against the Ravens on Christmas, kind of went into this, it was like all of a sudden it just everything snowballed. Against Kansas City, didn't look great, and he bounced back from the Washington game by winning in Washington, or bounced back from, the Baltimore game by winning in Washington. He bounced back against the Cowboys with a good all-around game. He missed some passes. Everybody expects him to be perfect. He's not perfect. There's new parts that you adapt to. That's early season stuff. Remember, everybody talks about the first 4 games of a regular season now is like a preseason. And so Brock was kind of getting the groove, and now they adapt without Brandon Ayuk, and now you adapt with Ricky Pearsall in the fold and figure out, thank goodness, that George Kittle can play through injury and make some plays down the field and try to eviscerate the heart out of every opponent he sees.
George Kittle, 3rd all-time in receiving yards, 5th in catches. Talk a little bit about him.
George Kittle, here, forward by George Kittle. I can talk about George for days. The thing with George, I use this for a few years now, is he's kind of like the spirit animal of the team, right? He just kind of gets everybody fired up to play football. But in the heat of the battle, like he just, against the Cowboys, they were doing okay, but it's like George took it upon himself in that second half going, throw me the ball 20, 40 yards downfield. I'm going to move the chains. Like when it was on the line in New Orleans in 2019, throw it to me on 4th down. I'm going to go down the field and I'm going to run through 3 Saints, take it as far as I can into field goal range. That's infectious, and you need that. And that style is kind of what Debo evoked, especially in 2021. And Debo hasn't produced the way he did in 2021, but his presence is obviously felt out there, right? Because when he's not there, there's just kind of not the same swagger on offense. George is maniacal as a receiver, as a blocker, as a leader. And it's why he's a Hall of Famer. It's kind of like when you say he's the 3rd all-time leading receiving yards leader in 49ers history, that's really a stunning fact. And the guy's played 7.5 seasons. Jerry obviously played a heck of a lot, and he's the number 1 in NFL history. T.O. Put his yards up there before he adiosed his way out of here. But George knows his place in history, and he appreciates it. And that's kind of the cool thing to see. He's gotten rewarded for that. And he knows, I will tell you, just being around him in the locker room and just around this team, everybody wants a piece of George Kittle. They want him to sign stuff. They want him to be the center of attention more than he necessarily wants to be. As much as he loves the spotlight, he's got that pro wrestler in him that knows how to turn it on when the lights are on. It's very demanding. I mean, there's a lot of stars on this team, but George seems to get the spotlight more than others, and he can handle it, which is a good thing. Because I've been around teams, different sports, where the superstar wants no part of the spotlight, and it kind of drags the team down almost because you're asking for a favor. Hey, can you talk about this? And it's like he understands that he needs to do that, and that's where they're lucky to have him. So,
Talk a little bit about the defense, Fred Warner, just the defense as a whole, what direction they're going under Nick Sorensen.
Yeah. What struck me
How
about
involved
him,
is Brandon Staley? Maybe, I don't know.
I think that's kind of like watching the training camp practices. Staley worked a lot with the defensive backs, while Sorensen tried to move into a role of overseeing everything, which is the way it's supposed to be. And Staley's up in the booth. He's not on the sideline interfering. I don't think they've been poorly coached. I think there's some people that just don't necessarily fit well, that they haven't maximized the defensive. There's been communication issues more than usual. I know there's been missed tackles. Missed tackles happen when guys are out of position and are not doing their job. And I know Fred's played on a bum ankle for the last few weeks. So I think So like, I have a mailbag coming out later this week where somebody asked me, well, who's going to be the big second half star? And I said, the easy answer people might say is McCaffrey if he plays. That could be true, but I think Fred Warner could be it again because it's time to play defense November, December time, and it could be Bosa, but I think Fred is he's such a leader on that defense and can control everything, whether it's stopping the run or drifting in coverage and making a play. And if he gets Dre Greenlaw back, that's going to give Fred a little bit more freedom, I think, to make those plays. So I think Dre's presence has been missed, obviously. I think Devondre Campbell, we saw this in training camp. It wasn't like a mystery that or a surprise that he was going to struggle in coverage. But at the same time, your option was like playing D Winters, who was going to be new and making a lot of mistakes also as a young guy. And obviously he did overrun Patrick Mahomes on the sideline, right? Whereas Devondre Campbell, he just gets mismatched against maybe a receiver or a running back out of the backfield and can't keep up on it. And that, the Niners have to figure out how to cover for that. And he played really well against Dallas after like the first opening snap where he kind of gave up a catch. He came back and played pretty well. So that's encouraging. But to me, it's that defensive line has been the engine on their playoff runs. And it's Malik Collins, I think, is pretty good on the interior. I think that's a good pickup. Jordan Elliott can have his moments. I like him. I like both those guys. Leonard Floyd, people are giving flack to because he signed a 2-year, $20 million contract, but he started every game. He only has a couple sacks, and I think like 8 quarterback hits, which isn't enough, but he hasn't been bad. Like he and Bosa, I think they like playing together, and Floyd's just a pro. So I'm not worried too much about him. I'm just worried about what else do you have on that defensive front? Because when you plug in a backup tackle, and I'm the opposing offense coordinator, I'm like, run it straight up the middle at those guys because they are not stopping the run. And that's evident. I mean, they gave up 4 touchdowns to the Cardinals on the run. And they went all of 2011 without giving up a rushing touchdown until I think their 15th game of the year. So they needed to tighten that up. And then I think Deommodore Lenoir is loving this season because he has continued his ascent and he picks off Dak with an incredible interception on the sideline. And he has that hunger to show everybody he can be a Pro Bowler and an All-Pro. And Charvarius Ward had that last year, and it rubbed off on Demo this year. And I think that's cool. The safeties have been a problem more than an answer. Aside from an interception here or there by Mustafa or Brown, there have been a lot of blown assignments in the back, and the Niners have to live with it because those are young guys. You're not playing the veteran safeties back there. Otherwise, you would have gone and gotten one. You were hoping Hufanga was going to come back to full health, but you couldn't necessarily assume that, and they didn't play him the first week of the season, so you knew he was going to take time. And they had Eric Harrison for training camp. They cut him loose midway through camp. So because they went young, and when you go young, there's going to be breakdowns, and you hope once you get into October, November, December, they've learned what to do, and it looked like they've come around a little bit. Mustafa's really fun to watch because he has that Dre Greenlaw, I'm going to hit you and I don't care what happens mentality. And Jair Brown is somebody, I mean, they're all kind of like more strong safety. I want to come up in the box and smash you and steal the ball from you than go play center field and pick off a ball, but they can do that when needed. So I'm a little bit concerned about that back end because they got some pretty good quarterbacks still to go down this road. And especially, I'm not worried about the Bucs because they've lost Mike Evans and Godwin, right? And then the Seahawks they've tamed. And then you get to Green Bay where I don't know if Jordan Love will be back or Malik Willis, but Packers have those younger receivers, but then you get to Josh Allen in Buffalo. That'll be fun to see. I mean, I couldn't tell you 3 wide receivers he's throwing to, but they got Josh Allen who's going to throw it no matter what.
Is Talanoa Hufanga coming back this year?
So, I wonder because I think the Niners will say that he's planning to, right? So they're giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to try to come back. The fact that he was ruled out so fast with like torn ligaments in his wrist, that's not great, but they're not necessarily asking him to catch the ball at safety. right? So I wouldn't rule it out. And, he is such a positive guy in that locker room and on the team. Um, it's nice to have him around, and hopefully that kind of they can string along because here's the deal. You don't want to rule him out, because if he's healed in a couple months or whatever it takes, and if he can contribute in the playoffs, it'd be great. Remember, I think it was in 2012 they made the playoffs and they had already ruled out Paris Harrelson and put him on IR, and you couldn't bring a guy back, and they were kicking themselves because he was ready to go. And he wasn't like a game-changing linebacker, rest his soul, great guy. But it's like you don't want to steal that hope yet. So I think if you can continue, give him that there might be a chance to come back, then hopefully he can. At the same time, you got to make accommodations if you can't. That's why they brought in, was it Adrian Amos last week? And I think he only played a couple special team snaps, but you have to have that veteran insurance back there.
Last one for me, Cam. Oh, go ahead, Maddie.
I was going to say, is there anybody on the market right now? Everybody says DJ Jones from Denver, but Denver's 5-3 guys. Like Denver's actually competing this year, shockingly. Are there people on the market defensively, maybe even offensively, call right tackle, that we might be looking at? I know in years past, and this seems to be a perfect time, right? They get the week off. You're going to have some teams that really fall out of it this week. I really hope the trade deadline eventually gets moved back to after Thanksgiving, because it'll give a lot of these teams a little more time to make these decisions. But is there anybody out there that would realistically come in for, a conditional fifth, conditional fourth for depth? Like, I'm not expecting an Ndamukong Suh type of person coming in, but anybody out there? I know there's nothing on Carolina. I've already looked.
All right. Well, I mean, I'm sure they've scoured everything and they are all ready to pull the trigger on a couple guys. Knowing their history and that they try to swing a deal, I can see them trying to do that. It doesn't sound like wide receiver, because when John Lynch was on the radio today, said they didn't go after Deontay Johnson. Now he could be fibbing, but I could understand that if they didn't, because they're commit. That's why they drafted Ricky Pearsall, right? You have your wide receiver backup. And Chris Conley is the guy that took all of Ayuk's snaps during camp. So, it's like that's your built-in guys ready to go. So that's why I don't think wide receiver was the issue. That's why I think defensive line is the bigger one. The Broncos are still kind of in a rebuild. And it's like you still have a young quarterback. And so they're not going to keep DJ Jones next year probably, as he's on an expiring contract. So I think Niners could still make a play for him. Because I don't think he's a main guy for them. I think he's like a number 3 defensive tackle. I could be wrong. But I think he might fit the Niners better anyhow. So I would consider that still. I think Kendrick Bourne is still out in New England. And if they want the receiver, then go get him and bring him in, because the Patriots are a mess.
Devin Godshaw, too, probably.
Yeah.
Defensive line, maybe.
Right. I'm sure there's names out there that it's almost like you connect the dots on familiarity with coaches and scheme. Okay, more than this guy's good. So you talk about wanting to replace Colton McKivitz. Well, the problem is in the NFL, there's not many good right tackles. If they were good right tackles, they'd most likely be playing left tackle, because there's not many good left tackles in the league. And Colton McKivitz is very trusted by your quarterback. If you take him out of the lineup, that may have ramifications on Brock Purdy. Not saying Brock feels like, safe as a kitten back there, obviously. And Colton gets beat every once in a while, but he's a guy that's very well liked. He's worked really hard to get where he is, and I don't see them replacing him. Pooney's obviously locked in a right guard. Brendel has taken so much heat at the start of the season, but there's nobody better to replace him with. Feliciano's coming back, so that kind of is your insurance on the interior offensive line. And then you look at the running back situation. If they see something to McCaffrey over this next week, okay, and if they trade for a running back, then there's alarm bells that McCaffrey is not coming back, okay? But every indication is he is, so that's good, right? Because if he's not coming back and you're kind of like relying on Jordan Mason Garendo to get you through the next 14 games or 13 games, whatever it is, that's a long haul. So I would just say this, though. They are not in dire predicament as a lot of people think they are. I think the Chiefs absolutely needed to add a wide receiver for Mahomes, and they got one, right? The Lions needed to add a defensive end because they lost Hutchinson. I don't know what they're doing. But the Vikings lost their left tackle, and they went out and got the best left tackle available in Cam Robinson. So the Niners' big loss was Brandon Ayuk, and the Niners feel they already had that with Ricky Pearsall, right? So if they don't make a trade, it's not a disaster, because you also still have to rebuild this roster because you have some older guys that are going to need replacing in the next year or two.
They also have on the Giants, Ojulari. I think that's his name.
You can throw out a lot of names.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
it's like, what's the connection? It's more of the, what's the scheme fit? Will this guy fit in well? I mean, a year ago they went after Chase Young, and it's like, okay, well, Chase
Young
Young
and
played
Randy
with,
Gregory.
yeah,
Right?
but that was an earlier one from Denver. So there's always that Denver connection, right? That you have to look for. That getting back to DJ Jones, because they like to swing deals with them. But so back to Chase Young. So he played with Bosa, and obviously, I'm not saying Bosa has any influence on things, but if Bosa kind of vouches for a guy, and like Chase Young did not play well here, but he was also kind of banged up, and the whole effort thing in the NFC Championship game was not good. But that brought me, like, because I scouted this out the other day. I think I had a story today or yesterday about the trade prospects. And so one of Bosa's best friends is Sam Hubbard, of the Bengals. And I think he's in an expiring contract or has like a year left. And to me, that makes a heck of a lot of sense because the Bengals are investing money in their quarterback, receiver, other stuff. I don't know if they're going to reinvest in Sam because he's not having a big year. And if they can get like a mid-round pick for him from the Niners, then I would pull that trigger because Bosa would love it. And then you're not asking him, like, Bosa's playing 86% of the snaps. That's too much this time of year. He needs to be full go in December and January. He's playing way too much right now because they only have essentially 3 defensive ends, and you need to get some help in there. And I would love to see a Sam Hubbard trade.
I like that call.
All right. Cam Inman, thank you so much for coming on.
From Sam to Cam.
Make sure you get the book.
Yeah,
yes,
so
buy the book.
You can go on to Amazon to buy it, or if just message me on Instagram at 49ers.cam if you really want a personalized signed one, because I've had a lot of 49er fans from across the country and some globally reach out. And so I don't mind doing a quick in scripture and a message, and then I go down to my post office a mile down the street. I see my guy Mike behind the counter. He's gotten to know me pretty well. So I don't mind sending those out. People Venmo me $30, and that includes postage. So if you want up for that, do that. We got holidays coming. Go holiday shopping. I know you all have red Niner stockings hanging by the chimney that need to be full of not just one book, but multiple books. So please reach out.
I gotta
Yeah, I'm
add
gonna.
yours to the.
I'll reach out to you later, Cam.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same. I gotta get yours added to the library because like all the ones I have are from like, I have a bunch from when the franchise started in 1946 up. But this is the first time there's really been one that's kind of covered the later years more in full, as opposed to be like, oh, okay, Steve Mariucci's about to take over. Bye. So
And it's kind
really
of snappy.
cool.
It's a snappy looking color, isn't it? Though it's like,
Yeah, it'll fit on the it'll fit right next to Bill Walsh's The Winning Edge very well. Right.
If you
like,
have
it'll
that,
look
do you
great.
have that book? Because I'll trade you this one. I'll trade you that for this.
I might have to be a few more.
You know what's
couple
amazing?
more
Like,
autographs.
how do they not make more of those? I mean, that is the most coveted book in sports. It's amazing.
It's crazy. I got it. It was somebody's Christmas gift. So whoever put it on eBay, bless them. So
That's
great.
awesome. That is great. Yeah, I think we all should look for one of those. So that's good. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate having me on, and I'm sure I'll see you down the road, on the road.
We'll
Somewhere.
probably run into you in Tampa. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
My guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll be in Tampa as well. So
Great.
all right, Cam, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for having me, guys.
Always,
good to see you. Always great to see you, and you guys do good work for the faithful. Good work.
Thank you.
You do too, my friend. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Yes. Take care, Cam.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Good dude.
Cam Inman.
We had a great conversation out at that quarterback thing in San Jose back in May. And like, dude's just like me and just to kind of peel it back behind the scenes a little bit. A few years ago, when me and Jess met up in Atlanta,
Uh-oh. Did you freeze?
I'm still here. I'm still
Oh,
here. I'm
okay.
even inside, so I don't know what's going on. But we met up with Cam, and like he got all, he talked to us or whatever. And I am telling you, every time I've seen him since, and I've seen him a bunch of times since. Hey, Maddie, how you doing? Blah 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 blah. Like every time, not like, hey, guy. Like no, he just, real one right there. So for sure.
Yeah, Cam's good people. I like Cam. Um, I'm glad we finally got to connect because last season I had seen him in Pittsburgh, week 1, and I had asked him about coming on, and he was like, I'm writing a book right now, so as soon as that's done, I'll come on. So I'm glad he finally came on. He's Cam's definitely one of my favorites. Um,
He's not
all
a
right,
hot
so
take
let's
artist. He actually like, watches the game of football and puts things out there. That thing that he mentioned, by the way, about familiarity between coaching staffs and defensive staffs it's a real deal. Like, and
yeah,
especially,
yep,
working relationship, general managers and stuff like that. It's all stuff that like a lot of people that are paying attention to all the time, are going to notice. But, maybe the casual fan just doesn't think of it all the time. But that's guys like him that aren't just flipping out the hot takes to flip out the hot takes out there. Like they're the backbone and are really going to give you the information you need to know about this team. And also, if he says a dude's valid, like a dude's probably pretty valid. So it's good
yeah.
support.
That's
Just
why I like talking to the beat writers because they
yes,
always have that extra insight. Like someone like Matt Mayoko and Jennifer Lee Chan um, but yeah. So Maddie, what were your thoughts on the Cowboys game?
they survived it, man. Like really. They didn't do it in the most perfect way that we would all want to, right? There were not as many happy little trees painted up in the corner. They really tried to cop it up at the end and give us all a small heart attack. Um, Shout out to them though for allowing my CD Lamb best ball shares to start shooting through the roof because CD Lamb had a really good night after that. But other than that, like, they survived and advanced. Like they really struggled in the first half and they seemed to find their footing at halftime and they kind of came out in the second half a little more amped up. It seemed like they just wasn't so much they put their feet on the gas pedal a little bit more. It was almost like they got woke up, like they got hit in the mouth or something. That's the type of win that they needed. If they had gone into this bye at 3-5, I don't know. You know what I mean? I still don't know what they're in for in Tampa. I am I want to be very optimistic, based on the fact in previous years when they've come off of their bye week, they come out fresh, sharp, and ready to go. So I'm really hoping that's the case this year. But this has been such an emotional roller coaster this whole year. And I'm not just talking about on the field. I mean, off the field. You have Brandon Ayuk stuff, and then he gets hurt, right? You finally have him, and then you lose him. Ricky Pearsall gets shot and come back, right? And then Mooney Ward's daughter. Just all this stuff, right? Stuff that has nothing to do, nothing you can control. It's just stuff that happens, right? And that's a emotional toll on a team. So I hope they took the week off to kind of decompress, get away, the ones that could, to do their best. Because this is one of the, and they're still probably kind of processing a little bit of Super Bowl stuff last year. So for them to beat Dallas still makes you feel good because it reminds you that we're still ahead of them, right? As long as you're still ahead of Dallas, you're still in that kind of tier of teams that can still win. So I look in that NFC, everybody's all over Detroit right now, which is awesome. But just remember, Detroit's a dome team, and they don't have their best pass rusher, and that's going to eventually show up and bite them in the butt. Minnesota's starting to come back to earth. Jordan Love can't stay healthy, so yeah, Malik Willis is an awesome backup, but I would be totally cool facing Malik Willis in the playoffs. Philly seems like they're playing better, but I don't really trust it. And Washington seems to have a horseshoe up their ass. So this conference is definitely winnable. And if things end the way I think they're going to, there's going to be an NFC title game in Detroit, and we're all going to want to be there.
Yeah,
And the chances
I
of
have
that increase because of the win against Dallas. I don't think that happens if they beat Dallas. Just to wrap up that thought about the Dallas game.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I have my reservations about Detroit. I mean, people like, yes, they lost Aiden Hutchinson. But they blew out the Cowboys, spanked the Texans, but Cowboys and the Texans are I'm sorry, Titans. They're bad teams.
Titans had a rough week last week too. They basically like jettisoned half their defense, right? They're like Ernest Jones by another guy by, right? And but if you go back and look at that game, just to show you the power of special teams and why it's so damned important for this team to straighten out their special teams. Um, Jared Goff had 85 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. And the reason he had that is because the drive links were like 2 yards, 2 plays, 26 yards, 5 plays, 31 yards. Because the special teams is just eating all that yardage up, right? They're giving their offense a chance to do things. So they can run their first 5 plays in the end zone, in the red zone. That's part of this team's problem, right? Like a lot of times they don't get that. They have to do like an 8 to 12, 11 play drive just to get down into the red zone. By that point, like you've pretty much seen everything for that drive, and like you might be running out of plays when you get down to that point. So it just there's a lot of things that I think that are able to break right now, and I hope this team really reaches their potential after the bye week because I think they have that opportunity if everybody comes back. That's going to come back, right? I think we all know how Christian McCaffrey, how important he is to this team. I think we've all seen that now. Um, we can all talk about MVP stuff, but he probably should have been MVP last year because we took him off the team. I don't. They probably don't get out of the first round playoff game.
I agree. I mean, this bye week came at a very good time.
Perfect time, right? Like right
Yes.
before the trade deadline and everything else.
Like it couldn't have come at it like a better time. It gives the guys a chance to rest. It gives the guys who are coming back, a chance to get back, a la Christian McCaffrey. But I definitely would like to take this time to express our thoughts and prayers to the Ward family with regard to the passing of Charvarius and Monique Ward's daughter, Amani Joy. It was devastating news. It is devastating news, and our prayers go out to the family. Um, yeah, I mean, we'll talk about Tampa Bay next week. Um, but just uh, you know, they don't have Mike Evans, they don't have Chris Godwin. Um, they don't have very much. So
And we're a good matchup. They're a good matchup for us, right? They've run the same system for 3 years, right? It doesn't matter if it's Tom Brady at quarterback or Baker Mayfield at quarterback. They're running the same system, basically. Um, so that to me seems like a pretty good matchup. They sit, and Tampa's going to play this week, so we don't know if they're going to be healthy or not healthy or whatever. You know what I mean? So they've got a good running game. That's the one thing that does worry me, and they're totally cool with sticking with it. So if this running game, this running defense doesn't get right over the bye week, you could see a big day for a Rashad White or a Bucky Irving or even a Sean Tucker. Um, so they can pivot like that if they want to, but you know,
So
we'll see.
we touched a little bit of the trade deadline with Cam. The trade deadline is Tuesday, November 5th. Maddie, what do you think that we are going to do?
I don't think we're going to do anything, to be honest with you. Um, I would like to think that they're going to go out and get something done, um, but I don't know how the prices are. Right? Like it's just you can go out and get a Devonte Adams for a certain amount, right? But then another guy goes for a different amount. Like you really don't know what people are asking for, and you don't know really who's on their list. And they might feel, and I've seen this before with a lot of teams, and you'll hear this, and don't be surprised you hear this from John Lynch, specifically on his KMBR stuff. Well, we look at an addition like Dre Greenlaw and Christian McCaffrey as like an in-season acquisition, and you can do that without surrendering draft picks. Um, be prepared to hear that, right? I mean, they've made moves in the past, and it's not like a knock on them. I just wonder if the market's gonna kind of go in their direction this year. If it does, great. I think if the Rams had lost against the Vikings last Thursday, I definitely think there might have been some moves made. Yes, even in the division, just because of systems. Um, I just, but that didn't happen, so that's a wrap. Um, Rams stayed alive. They'll probably stay alive just enough, and then in about 2 weeks they're going to be like, "Boy, this is really traded some of the guys." So I don't think they're going to do anything. And if they do, it'll be for like a depth piece. There's sadly nothing like impactful on defensive lines right now that might be available. Like unless Jacksonville wants to start like, if Trayvon Walker is available, maybe that might be something to look at. But I wouldn't want to trade much for him.
Pterodome. Um, yeah, I mean, I would actually kind of be surprised if we didn't do anything.
Really?
I real Yeah, I mean, I really don't think we're gonna go after a wide receiver because I agree with Cam. Like that's why there's Ricky Pearsall,
Yeah.
and they seem to be pretty set, with Chris Conley and who they have in that room. Um, you know, if we do something, I think it'll be along the defensive line. I've heard the name Calais Campbell, but he's 38. He's definitely up
38
there.
and like, in defensive line years, that's like, it's like dog years, right? You add it into like seven. Like he's 240 in like defensive line years at 38. Like holy Pete, man.
Yeah.
Like what is he going to give you? 15 to 20 snaps a game? Like
I mean,
my dream scenario is like New Orleans starts dumping guys, right? Or people like that. And there might be a team that surprises us, right? Maybe one team just pulls the plug and says, "The hell with it." Like we know we're not getting better. So, and if that happens, maybe the 49ers get in on that. Washington did that last year because Sweat and Young came on the market at the same time. The 49ers ended up with Young.
mhm.
I kind of wish they'd ended up with Sweat. I think the Super Bowl might have gone a little differently, but you know, see what happens. But you've also got Hargrave coming back next year, so you can't just start adding whatever. I like the Sam Hubbard idea. I think Sam Hubbard would be a killer
Yeah,
addition.
I like that idea as well.
I really like that idea.
I mean, like I said, excuse me, I would be surprised if they didn't do anything. But we shall see what
I think
happens.
they're
We'll
definitely going to try, but it's one of those deals where like, somebody can go out and try to find a relationship, but somebody else has to be willing to jump into it, right? So I don't know if anybody's going to be willing to just hand things over to the 49ers at this point. I feel like the 49ers are going to always end up having to pay an extra tax because they're the 49ers, right? Like, I don't know.
I will say that most of the fan base is gonna like have a meltdown if we don't do anything.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but you understand that like they're gonna have a meltdown regardless, right? Like if they trade
That's
for
true.
somebody, they're gonna be like, this guy isn't good enough. What are we doing trading future picks for this guy? And then if
Right,
they
like, or
don't
if
do
it's like
anything,
a
it's like
depth
they're not serious
piece
about the
and right.
season. It doesn't matter. There's just a specific, but here's the thing, it's not just fan base. It's every fan base. Okay? It is every fan base. Every fan base has these pockets where no matter what is done, they hate it. And they're the most vocal. They're the ones you're going to hear about, right? The biggest thing I'm always trying to be is objective. Even when things are great, I try to be objective. Even when things suck, I try to be objective because I know it's not all suck and it's not all great. But sometimes, man, there is a lot of suck with this team that really shouldn't be there. And we feel like it's our job to call that out and talk about it. But they usually straighten it out, week 9, week 10, maybe week 8 against the Cowboys, Um, Shout out to the Cowboys, by the way, for just being the get right team. We appreciate you. Thanks for being there for us. We appreciate you. You're like a Charleston chew in the freezer. Always there when you need
Cardome
it.
says that he's rooting against all NFC West teams this week.
This is what we should be doing every week, guys. We are always rooting against NFC teams, and if it's a team that we are tied with and they're playing another NFC West team, then we root for the team in the NFC West that has fewer wins. That's how that works. That's how it should work. And then you always want to root for teams in the NFC that are playing against teams in the AFC. You want them to lose because of tiebreakers. You want them to lose just to make things better, because there's still a lot of tiebreakers that the 49ers are still screwed with in the NFC. So, because 2 of their wins are AFC this year. So that finale against Arizona, man, I just keep looking at that thing and I'm like, that game shouldn't mean anything. Yet here we are. And then I look at the one thing that I see and I just look at it. It's almost like a post-credit scene of an Avengers movie. You play Detroit on December 30th, and then the next week you got to play Arizona. And we've all seen the record of teams that play Detroit and then their record the next week, which is very similar to what we were doing to teams last year. So, will the 49ers clinch the division by then so the Arizona game doesn't matter so they can take that week off? Or are they going to be beat to hell after the Detroit game on a Monday night and then have to play a flex game against Arizona for the division? And if you look at Arizona's schedule, they definitely have a chance to match us the rest of the way. So, and they'll have the win over us until that point. So, I
Right.
think they're going to be a pain in the ass the rest of the way. I'm not so much worried about Seattle. I'm not so much worried about the Rams. The Cardinals don't seem to be going away.
I don't know, but like Cam is right though. Like the Cardinals, they always seem to start off great and
They
then they
are,
just bottom
yeah,
out. And
they
that's
do.
actually how I see the Vikings. What's going to happen to the Vikings? I feel like they're just going to bottom out the rest of the way.
I think people realize what they have, and I think the Vikings also realize what they have right now, right? I think people are surprised, and they probably thought Darnold might take that extra step up, but when you really dig into what the Vikings are doing, um, yeah, Justin Jefferson's had some big plays, but he's not having the type of year that you would want him to have as that number one receiver. Um, if you look at him, Jamar Chase has had a couple of good games this year, but if you look at Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Brandon Ayuk, all the guys that signed big contracts this year as big wide receivers, they're not having some like AJ Brown and Philly year like it was a couple of years ago, or when Tyreek Hill went to Miami. They're not having that type of production, right? Um, Rams always look good as they get healthier, but here's the thing with the Rams: they never get healthier. Like as soon as they lose one guy, they lose 2 more. Like they're Hydra. Like they lose one, 2 more take their place. That's just how it goes. Um, they're going to be around, but they've also got a really tough schedule. Rams, for some reason, have a crazy tough schedule this year. So
Yeah.
hopefully they can do some of our dirty work for us, though, knocking off some of the other NFC teams, getting them some losses, kind of getting them whatever the thing is. So, and I'm also rooting for Washington to win the NFC East because I have a few tickets on Jaden Daniels to win MVP, and they were at a very, very nice price range if you took that over the summer. So, also I hate Philadelphia, so I would totally love to see them not win the division, and honestly, just not even make the playoffs. So that would make me happy. That would bring me joy.
We got to take one day at a time, one game at a time. This season is definitely a different season for sure.
Hmm.
Um, and let's see how it all plays out. But like I said, this bye week came at a really good time. Um, so we shall see. But let's go to that hurry up offense in the 2-minute warning and go right ahead.
Tickets are available for the Seattle game. Yes, Seattle game. I'm not going to the Seattle game. Um, and the Chicago game. Although if somebody doesn't buy the tickets to the Chicago game, I may end up taking myself to that. I don't know yet. So, NinersNE.com. That's the number 9, ERSNE.com, and you'll see the tickets that are available there. Again, Seattle and Chicago. I know the Rams are coming to town too. I believe that's a Thursday nighter. So, and of course, you get Detroit at the end of the year. Although I think I might go to that game.
Yeah, and they're very good seats. So go check out that
And
website.
you get food with it. Like you get food with it. Poor Bryant. Like Bryant gained like 25 pounds. I believe Steve-O actually gained 25 pounds when he used my
Yeah,
tickets
Steve-O
for the
said that he ate
preseason
a
game.
lot.
Yeah.
Well, shout out to everybody in the chat. Thank you, Cam Inman, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Next week, we are doing a salute to service show. So we are going to have some Niner fans on the show who either are active military or who have served this great country. And yeah, just, take it one game at a time, guys. Don't lose faith. That's why they call us the faithful. And as always, go Niners, and we will see you next week, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And we're out.
And of course, for the upstart 49ers, they're 6 yards away from Pontiac. 3rd and 3.
We'll see a pickup sometime on the right side, possibly.
Montana looking, throwing in the end zone.